I'm ecstatic to be here, man. Part 2 of the show today. I should say part 2. Second show of the day. We have got I'm sure another packed show. We've been kind of knocking these subjects out of the park lately. I mean, just one after another, and then kind of stringing them along. That last episode was a ton of fun. If you guys missed 147, you need to go back.
148.
148. Golly. Can you believe we're almost at 150, man?
It's a lot of content.
That's crazy.
I was actually thinking the other day, I'm like, there's so much content that even if we say silly things, it'd be hard to find.
Yeah. I mean, 150 shows is about an hour and a half a piece on average. I mean, that's a ton of content, man.
It is. That being said, I was grateful the other day thinking, so I'm on YouTube a lot. As I work, I put it next to me. It drains the battery because there's a screen, though. I don't need to see the videos, really. I just listen.
Yeah.
And YouTube, it goes through all these things where there's deplatforming and new rules, and you can't really say what you want, or you're demonetized, and that means there's less incentive to make good content.
That's right.
It's not just that you can't make money. Like, people need money to be able to do certain things. And in the podcast world, there's not that. But it could come, because what happens on YouTube that we don't realize, it's not just because people see it, because there is so much content out there. It's because YouTube has algorithms that scans through everything on their platform that apparently is really well done and smart, because it finds things. Yeah. And that could be done to podcasts, but because podcasts have another format to where it's not monetizing on it, and you kind of own it, like we own the content, we pay somebody money to host it on Libsyn. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, we're protected. But one day, maybe Libsyn gets infiltrated and they start scanning through, and they're like, they've said government sucks way too many times on that podcast.
Well, I think it's funny you mentioned that, man. In prep for the show today, I was looking over at our buddies at Reason.com, right? And through their Twitter account. Their Twitter account, man, they have quite a few. I want to say it's like 245,000 followers on Twitter.
Very cool.
If you look at how many likes, retweets, and comments that they have on their page, on their Twitter pages, or their tweets, it is strikingly low. Striking. Like, I look at it and I just go, oh, wow. Like, this is just... It's non-existent. Like it's one of those things, like you say, if algorithms don't match up, or these guys are a little too individual and not enough statist, then they get completely wiped out from people's feeds.
They could have been part of some of the shadow bans, and after your shadow ban, your algorithm probably doesn't reset correctly, or there could be some other reasons. They could have paid for a lot of subscribers who were bots in Tbilisi, Georgia. That's what happens for people who live in Georgia. If you do your ads wrong, or if you use some unscrupulous sites to get followers or subscribers or whatever, depending on the platform, you can get people from Georgia, but they end up being from Tbilisi, Georgia, and not from the Georgia you actually want your followers from.
Yeah, I mean, they have 242,000 followers, and on their latest post here about ExxonMobil did not mislead shareholders about climate risk. They've got 7 likes and 3 comments.
We get more than that.
I mean, they've got one on, this Greta Thunberg person being Time Magazine's Person of the Year. It's got 16 comments and 97 likes. Like, it's minuscule given the large amount of numbers that they have in terms of followers.
That's crazy.
And being a news source on top of it. It's just like, wow. They're obviously a blue check mark, so I don't know.
Well, they've got that at least. But we started off this episode a little differently than usual.
Yeah.
I read a quote, and for those who are watching the YouTube, I'm going to repeat the quote because that kind of got cut off because we might have some music that's,
Yeah.
The quote is, "Are you willing to fight for a person you don't know as much as you're willing to fight for yourself?" And if you do like the super analytical and you like analysis of this, no, there are differences, but at a higher level, I find it to be a really cool way to put forth the idea of like, that is the virtuous way of being, right? If you're standing up for something, you should at least standing up, maybe not actively doing something with your hands, at least standing up to the same degree. And because I think it's good to point out when somebody's right, even if they're wrong on everything else. The originator of this quote, I told you already, but it's quite surprising. Do you want to guess who it is while you know who it is already?
I don't. Not that scripted, man.
It's our man, Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders. And by our man, Banks means his man, not mine. No.
I mean, figure of speech. Don't put words in my mouth.
Your boy. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I think it is an interesting quote. I think you raise an interesting question, and I think the answer is more along the lines: will you fight for basically as hard for somebody else as you will for yourself? And I think you can answer yes, every time if you boil it down to the principles. For some people, am I going to fight as hard for somebody to defend themselves that I blatantly disagree with? Yeah, I'm going to fight for that right, because that means if we all have it, we all have it. I mean, it extends,
and that's part of the principle itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, I want you to say what you want. I want you to be able to protect yourself, your person, your property, your effects, your family. I want you to be safe in your house, because I want to be safe in my house from the government coming in to my house. Not you can't protect against evil. That's a different thing. But you can protect against government in terms of legality and what powers that they do and don't have. People out there, are in consensus that, hey, government, we don't care left, right, or center who we are. You don't have the right to come into our house. That is not a privilege that will ever be afforded to you. You don't have the right to debar us arms. You don't have the right to tell us what we can and can't say.
Well, that's actually you could use that as the example. Yes, people say that, but do people fight to make sure that the government isn't allowed to come into other people's houses? Because actually, I've heard many people make the argument that they are allowed to come into people's houses.
Most of the time, it's government too. It's government employees. It's worrywarts. It's people who are are busybodies.
But they're also part of the collective of America.
Sure.
Of people in general. So yeah, and so that means they're not willing to fight just as hard, because they probably wouldn't want it happening to them. And this is the crux of all hypocrisy, is people who they also don't want to be told what to do in their circumstances of life, but don't support it for other people.
And I think it happened large back in kind of the Alger Hiss, the 50s types with the HUAC was where was
I'm scrunching my eyes because I'm confused.
Back in the day,
uninformed,
when they were investigating communism in the United States,
okay,
the Alger Hiss tapes and all that fun stuff, and this gets bastardized a lot, and I'm just pulling this from memory, so excuse me if I'm a little rusty on who all the players were, but you had the House Un-American Activities, whatever it was, right? That was HUAC, and then you had who was the senator on the other side that always gets... I know who you're talking about. It's also a verb.
Everybody
right?
knows who we're talking about.
Yeah, so basically, back in the day, there were a lot of people, especially quote-unquote Republicans out there, who were like, let's drive this out. I mean, it happened here in Georgia where, communists were debarred ballot access because they didn't like what they had to say.
I mean, hypocrisy is probably as old as time. I could take a Bible reference to where who's the disciple who betrayed Jesus?
Paul.
Yeah. Well, actually, not just Paul, but all the disciples like, no, you can't go die. Like, and Jesus like, whoa. Like, the principle is this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like, well, he's special, but I'm not special in that way.
Right.
This is going to happen. They're like, no, but you're like, what are we going to do without you? Like, no, that's the principle.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, Republicans abandoned.
I bastardized the Bible there completely.
We're not perfect people, but yeah, I mean, this notion that Republicans have always been stalwarts for protecting rights, I think is gone long by the wayside. I mean, we're talking 70 years now when when they stood up, the HUAC investigations and things like that. God, I almost had it on the tip of my tongue that time, and I missed it.
Does it start with a C?
Boy, I
want to say C or D.
Just look up.
Or maybe
HUAC.
I'm just remembering my grades.
When the Democrats and the Republicans failed to protect the rights of speech and ballot access and things like that in terms of association for the communists in this country, we started going. I mean, we were already skipping down that damn path anyway, but that was one of those things where, hey, yeah, you start to understand maybe the communists don't want you to have those rights, instated. And it's not because of that specific, instance, but a train of abuses of rights. You didn't allow communists to be communists out in the open. You didn't allow, things like that to happen because you, quote unquote, thought it was bad, right? And so you suppressed it, you marginalized, you angered, you demoralized, and then what happens? They form in these small little pockets in people's basements and garages, and they get together and they get more disenfranchised with the system.
And that's how you get Bernie Sanders.
And that's how you get Bernie Sanders.
It's interesting because this will tie into what we're talking in today. So we're going to be talking at the end of the show about Johnny Isaksson's farewell speech.
Speaking of communist.
That's going to talk about bipartisanship. It's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
We will also talk about Elon Musk and the need for degrees or fancy titles from your schools and so forth. And the one that will play into, we'll also be talking about A.G. Barr and his comments about cops.
That bastard.
So, but I thought we would start with Elon Musk. It's an article that's a few years old, and I just started scrolling through my Facebook, and I will play a clip of his and talk about him, but it's actually reminded me about of an email that a friend of mine copied me in that I think is about a few weeks ago. That is, I think, brilliant. Mm-hmm. I'm biased, but that also talks about the same subject. So Elon Musk a few years ago gave an interview, and this is what he said to the interviewee when they were talking about degrees from fancy schools.
Which college or which university?
It's not. There's no need even to have a college degree.
Oh, well, okay.
At all, or even high school. If somebody graduated from a great university, that may be an indication that they will be capable of great things, but it's not necessarily the case. If you look at, say, people like Bill Gates or Larry Ellison, Steve Jobs. These guys didn't graduate from college.
Dropouts, yeah.
But if you had a chance to hire them, of course, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, okay.
So
of course, I like the idea. Elon Musk is another example of somebody we can point out. He says good things, even though he did he drop out? I think he dropped out too.
Yeah.
But he's also an example of somebody who I don't agree with on lots of things, but this is a true fact. And actually, Google and I think it was Google and Apple not that long ago in the past months came out saying that they do not require a bachelor's anymore as a prerequisite to applying for a job.
That's right.
My friend, we mentioned him before, his name is Charles Gregory. He's the one who donated the Ron Paul, what do you call that? Neon sign.
A neon sign, yeah. Over my right-hand shoulder up here, you will see the Ron Paul 2008 neon sign that we are now graced with because of the marvelous charity in Gregory's heart is...
Hold on, people don't do private charity just like that without any government incentive.
Give things to silly podcasts.
What are you talking about?
Like the rebellion.
So he copied me on an email that he sent to the Certified Financials Planners Board. He is interested in lots of things and was thinking about becoming a certified financial planner. He likes to collect those certifications and so forth. And he was dismayed that you have to have a bachelor's. You can pay them for the course and then to take the test, and you can get the test, right? Mm-hmm. That this proving I haven't taken a lot of tests. Yeah. You can get the test. You can
study
and there's another word I'm looking for. You can be successful at getting the test. They'll say you passed. Passed is what I'm looking for.
Gotcha.
You passed the test. But unless you have a bachelor's degree, any bachelor's degree, they won't issue you the certification of being a financial planner that you could put in your office or whatever if you're working in that field, which is pretty silly. And so he copied on this email that is somewhat lengthy that I'm going to read you guys, and then I'd love to get Shane's input. He says, "To whom it may concern, I was just reading about what it takes to become a certified financial planner on your website and was disappointed to see the requirement of a bachelor's degree. I find it ironic considering what a terrible financial return on investment college has become for so many young adults. Many entering the workforce late, often with degrees of dubious value, and frequently unrelated to their ultimate career path, and graduating buried under tens of thousands in student loan debt. It seems like the smartest financial planners would be looking for ways to avoid this pitfall. After all, there are other legitimate ways to become knowledgeable and proficient in a skill set, reading and apprenticeship to name two. Furthermore, Offloading qualifications to third parties is lazy. Isn't the value you provide through your certification supposedly that you have determined an individual is competent in the financial planning field through your testing methods? And not simply that you determine that some other institution has confirmed an individual spent a great deal of money with it and the individual may have been proficient at art history? He could have put underwater basket weaving too. Let a college degree speak for itself for whatever it means to others and employers independently of your designation. It is painfully clear that colleges, as the sole source of higher education, isn't working for this country. The government subsidizes and the social marketing campaign that tells every young person that they must have a college degree that has created a huge workforce, social, and economic problems. I misread that. Student loan bubble, workforce shortages, lost productivity, grossly inflated cost of education, delayed families and children, ... We as a nation would all be better served by your competing with college degrees, not reinforcing its monopoly. Thank you for reading my concerns. I hope you will consider updating your requirements to remove the bachelor's degree in the future. Kind regards, Charles Gregory.
Yeah, I'm all for. I mean, obviously,
and that's a wrap on the podcast, guys.
Yeah, we're out of here. I mean, yeah, it's hard to disagree with Charles. I mean, is there something that sticks out to you that you disagree with, or is it
in his letter?
Yeah,
no, I just think it's awesome, and I wanted to share it.
Yeah,
so that's about it. My commentary, I was tickled by the way he phrased certain things.
Yeah,
that a smart financial planner might see that this is a financial decision of
farce.
Of poor value.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about that. I mean, I've obviously mentioned Connor Boyak's book that he edited. It's in his own words, it's a fancy way to say I didn't write the whole thing by myself.
Okay.
And it's skip college, basically become an entrepreneur, and not have any debt, all that kind of fun stuff. So the price of college, since government has gotten involved and determined and said, yeah, everybody has a quote unquote right to go to college, and we're going to do everything we can to take federal money and throw it at student-backed loans. The price of college banks in 2019, since that's happened, do you know as a percentage how much the cost of college has gone up?
If I remember the graphs, it's 450%.
No, it's actually closer to 1,200%.
Oh, maybe the graphs I saw was over a different period of time.
Yeah, it may have been, but 1,200% since the government has gotten into backing up the loans that occur for most people who go to college.
That's crazy. The most interesting part is comparing that to other things, and the graphs that I've seen, which must have been a different time period at least, will compare it to the price of food, the price of TVs,
flat screen TVs, where they've
basically either gone down or stayed flat,
and let's
adjusted for inflation, so not just being crazy.
Yes, not only adjusted for inflation, but when you look at what you get, right? Over time, and this book illustrates this perfectly, over time, what you see in this removing children by force from their families and conscripting them into a school system, the quality of education has just plummeted, right? I mean, there is absolutely zero. I say zero. There's hardly anybody out there that I would take seriously. They could argue that education today is far better than it was at the turn of the century, in the 1900s even.
Well, I mean, my buddy Charlie used the word monopoly. It's not exactly a monopoly, but it's a culturally sustained, government subsidized idea of a monopoly.
Yeah.
To a large degree.
Well, I mean,
effectively to whatever, 80-90% of it is kind of monopoly-esque, where there's no competition, because things that are not approved by one entity, the government, don't get the same kind of stamp that unfortunately culture says, ooh, fancy stamp.
Yeah, I mean, when Donald Schmidt sat here and kept talking about, well, there are going to be some people that disagree with you about homeschool, and they want to make sure that, there is, some oversight basically into the lives of homeschoolers and things like that. He kept using the word control. right? Control, control, control. You can replace control with the word tyranny, right? People don't need to answer to anybody for the education of their children, period. And I know some people were like, well, what about the kids? Some of the greatest atrocities in histories have been made with that argument. What about the kids? What about the kids' safety? What about the kids' education?
I think we even made an argument that same week of Donald Schmidt's podcast with Stephen Johnson that there's a large argument to make that even in subpar conditions, so parents aren't the greatest, it might be better for kids to still be with their parents than apparently the best alternatives we found, which are horrific. The whole foster care system, DFACS, government indoctrination system. Okay, if there's a better system, show it to me. But for now, it looks like it might be better just leave kids with their parents, even if they might not be the best parents in the world. There's just something there, some connection there that is too important, unless you have a perfect solution, which is obviously the perfect solution doesn't exist.
Yeah, well, and here's the other. I mean, you're sending your kids off to strangers. You don't know teachers. You don't know their lives. You don't know who they are personally. And I don't trust, there are people that I know that I don't trust with my kids, that I really intimately know. I don't know those people from, Jack and Jill, man.
But that could be solved. That could be solved by the free market in the same way that there's the joke. I know we're going to agree, but there's the joke of if you had said a decade ago, get into a car with a stranger you met on the internet. That'd be really funny, but that's what we do with Uber every day. Mm-hmm. The same method could be applied.
Yes.
To where we trust that's the thing. Parents pay for children to have Uber instead of buying them cars these days.
Yeah, you could, and that's the thing is, and it would cost us far less, quote unquote, as tax cattle to put kids in an Uber to send them to a school of our choosing that we want.
Even years ago, I went to private school a few different times. Mm-hmm. As you know, my schooling kind of eclectic,
spotty.
But I went to a private school here in northern Atlanta for 4 years, and it was a private school. The cost was less than half of what the average spending on education is in the United States at the time. And if you calculated the fact that my mom had to take me to school and the cost of gasoline, it might have just equaled out. I'm pretty sure I got a better education there than I would have at the public school. Actually, I know because I went to the public school the first year.
Yeah, and so when we see this private market solution that we, I took that poll the other day that it's not quite wrapped up.
Which one? Oh, yeah, I saw that.
On property tax.
There's 4% of people who I do not understand. I think they're insane.
I think even one of them said something to the effect of, I just wanted to be inflammatory. And so you're right to be inflammatory.
Oh, I like that person.
Yeah, I knew you would. So, property tax funding this thing, the way that we do this whole horrendous idea of, this system that, schools, not educate schools, because there's a differentiation that needs to be made, that schools, kids in indoctrination is one of the most evil things in terms of not only are we spending far, far, far more on it now than we used to, we are the product of this quote unquote schooling has declined exponentially. And to demonstrate that, I thought I'd pull up a quote from a very, very young Ben Franklin, at the time known as Silence Dogood, right? These were writings of Ben Franklin before Ben Franklin was Ben Franklin. This is when Ben Franklin had, was a journeyman, starting to learn the printing press and things like that, and would put things out for people because he had access. He'd get in, he'd do things under the cover of night and print a few pamphlets and things like that. One of the things he wrote as a teenager, self-educated teenager, was this, quote, "Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech," end quote. Teenagers, right? Teenagers in this nation in the 1700s, they were young, they were passionate, they were completely being run over by the crown at a lot of points. And I say completely. In this day and age, we think we were just free as hell underneath the crown.
That is true.
In terms
2% tax, what the 223?
3 is what broke this camel's back. And to understand that, people like Thomas Jefferson, like Patrick Henry, like all of these men who started their education at home and the care of their mothers and fathers, of their neighbors. These people got together, fought the Confederation of States, and then obviously subdued, but still got into the Bill of Rights and passed a smaller constitutional republic, which we all know is, as far as thanks to the Anti-Federalists. However, these guys and girls were all self-taught. For the most part.
we could talk on the podcast all day about stories of people who are self-taught who did amazing things. Like the world is replete. With word that I learned not in school.
It is the norm. And that's the thing, is the norm for self-educated people and entrepreneurs and visionaries is the norm in terms of private directed education versus this public crap.
Well, you could make the argument that education kind of has to come from yourself anyways. Like at a lower level, okay, kids, even at a lower level, actually, I'm going to correct myself. Most of the education is happening from the person learning. You can teach somebody, right? Like you can teach somebody, okay, you're going to
school.
You have to sit on the toilet and then you wipe for a little kid who's learning how to potty train or something. It's still them doing most of the work. So if you think that there's kind of a default thinking status quo that, oh no, it's this institution that gives all this knowledge to these people. No, everything is self-directed anyways. They go there, and the people who learn despite the subpar system it's them. It's not the system itself that is doing the work. And I think we've gotten that completely backwards. And for whatever reason, you're going to say something.
I was just gonna say the same. I mean, I was making the observation is, can you imagine a day and age now that we are 250 years, 60 years past Benjamin Franklin's Silence Do-Good letters? Can you imagine now an entire continent that was self-educated with the apparatus of the internet?
Well, I think
and
that
YouTube.
I think there's a lot of that. I think that the word despite is important. Is most people are self-educated. Now there is indoctrination happening, but the people who are educated, they've done it themselves despite a subpar system. You can go to school and not pay attention to anything. I know I did a lot of it. Or you can go to school and you can absorb knowledge because there is knowledge there. It's not like there's nothing there. And some people do more with it than others. Some people are made for the system. Like it's not an intrinsically bad system. It's just not a one size fits all. It doesn't work. I was thinking because when you talk about education, I remember your wife is a teacher, and I know that I've had a few good teachers, very rare, unfortunately, in my life, and how it must be frustrating for good teachers and people who like educating to be stuck in a system where they're stuck with bad teachers. And I don't know about you, but I know a few teachers, and they'll talk about the bad teachers all the time. In the same, it's the same in any industry, but for whatever reason, it seems like I hear that more from doctors and teachers. I might be conflating, but I wonder why.
Well,
something that where government has made them quasi monopolies where competition is limited.
And the thing is I mean, books were never a cheap thing back in the day. You know, and being able to read was one of those things where at the turn of the 1800s, the literacy rate was over 90%. That's incredible.
What's the literacy rate today?
You've got most people who are graduating high school that aren't literate at a 5th grade level.
So the literacy level definition might have been different now and then.
Sure. But, I mean, when you look at the words these guys used back in the day when we talk about literacy, you can definitely see that these guys have a much better grasp of the entirety of the English language than we do today. And that's at a, I don't know, quantifiably, what did they spend on that education? Because let's face it, most of the time during the day, these guys were working on something. They were learning a skill. They were, voluntold. Basically, you're going to work today. I don't know, whether it was a printing press or whether it was on ships or whether it was, minding a store or something. These guys were working during the day, and then at night, or during their downtimes, if they had a book and they read and they educated themselves, it was a minuscule price for education. Now,
I just don't understand. So the need to push reading is so low because wouldn't basic communication between people be something that most people are pretty incentivized to do?
Sure.
Whatever is of interest to them. Even I don't know, teenagers who can only think about one thing might want to write like a love letter to the girl that they're interested in.
Great point. Yeah, I mean, love is a fascinating the urge to reproduce in this world.
We were calling it love, Shane. Okay,
but I mean, I know. But to get into it, the amount that we spend on education today, any idea what we spend a year on education?
On average per student?
From and I want to clarify, this is elementary through secondary schools in the United States.
My understanding through the United States is that's about like $11,000.
Yeah, overall, a total number figure.
Oh, I don't know how to do that math.
It's over $700 billion a year.
Okay.
If these guys back in the day had access to $700 billion for self-directed learning.
Debauchery. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know what that looks like in missed opportunity. I don't know what that looks like in just overall ingenuity.
Imagine it, and you'll never get there. Is my default in my brain. Imagine when you think about missed opportunity at scale, which is what government does.
Yeah.
I don't think we're capable of imagining how much, even when we make an effort.
Because I think, on top of all of it, we talk about missed opportunity. We talk about the amount that was extracted from the people. We talk about what would it have been had it just been directed. Now you also got to take into effect of the malintent, the squander, and the waste that is evil. Like, no kidding,
and then
evil.
On every single one of those points, you have to do and then next, and then next, and then next, and all the repercussions of what would have been.
And it worked, and not working for, it worked in opposition to the premise of education.
In many instances, yeah.
Oh, it is. I mean, seriously, my brain's about to just leak out of my nose and my ears now.
It's the same as if you took an analogy and you force-fed people, right? You force-fed people fat and sugar, and they just got really, really... You're not even counting... Even if you wake up to the reality of things, you self-educate, you get rid of the indoctrination, and you fix the system. You still, on top of everything else, have to waste the time to lose all the fat because of they gouge, not gouge you, they force-fed you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, there's also that. The destruction of good is in every direction innumerable.
So, yeah. And so, as we're looking at these charts where, education for college has skyrocketed in college at over 1,000% since the inception of, government-backed college loans, because there's no incentive to now cut the cost and compete across colleges.
Or even pay attention to the value of what is being pursued.
Right.
I mean, that's the one that everybody jokes about. It's like, it's great that you want to study
women's dance theory.
Women's dance. You can major in the Beatles.
Yeah.
The band. You can have a 4-year degree on the Beatles. Now, there might be some jobs for somebody with that degree. Maybe, I don't know, 2, a handful, maybe a little bit more because there's a lot of people on the earth. But there definitely are not enough to have a whole course about it.
Well, here's the other thing. If you're just naturally driven and consumed by the Beatles, and you love the Beatles more than anything, and you find an outlet out there, a magazine, a YouTube channel, anything, anywhere. Mm-hmm. A great point about the book, Skip College, is there are ways to get into that field without having a degree that actually are to your advantage. Because here's what you can do. You can create content, for one thing. if you can create content because you love creating content and you can do it for free or at a cost to you, and then provide it to somebody like, let's say, Time or Rolling Stone or whoever some of these antiquated publications are anyway out there. The point is you can sit in there and you can say, hey, listen, I really, really, really love what you guys do. I would love to contribute nothing but the Beatles. By the way, here's some of my content. I'll work for free. Let's get some of this content out there. These are my thoughts on it. These are what I think about it. These are what these people were doing historically. These are some of the relationships. That content for a major organization that you can contribute for free because you don't have the debt. You don't have to make the $100,000 salary. You don't have just this burden on your back to where you've got to repay the banks and the state and stuff like that.
You basically got 4 or more years advance over other people, like or just like if you need to do things on spec because people are like, well, I don't know this person from Brainwave. You'd be like, hey, I'll just do it. If you like it once it's produced, it might take me 6 months to do that, but since I'm not going to college, maybe I can pay for those 6 months.
Yeah, and you have an original view too. All these, quote unquote, I was about to say monkeys. All these NPCs that go to the same cookie cutter classes, that get fed by the same cookie cutter professors that say, this is what you have to believe about the Beatles. This is the truth. Like, how skewed now is this representation of the Beatles? Because
then people like us, rebel rousers, have to do the hard work that we don't enjoy whatsoever. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
And say, no, you're all wrong. And point here, point there. I'm gonna dissect your thing. And it's a great point.
You have such a better chance of being able to make it into you might not be the smartest, you might not know everything, but the fact that you can create content and do it in a market at a more affordable rate, if not completely free, to give yourself value to somebody else that wants to pay you eventually, that makes you indispensable at some point.
It's just another example that we find them all the time of the free market cannot be stopped by anything.
Nothing.
And so it's like, well, guess what? You created a competitive advantage for these other people. Most people might be going that direction, but because they're all going that direction, this guy has so much opportunity.
Yeah. The other one of the big points that they make in that book, besides the ability to compete without a degree and that burden of debt, over you. Oh boy, I was losing my train of thought. Is golly, I hate when I do that.
We get so excited. It happens.
I just look at this.
Shane's like, everybody's going to listen to this podcast, and the schools are going to stop tomorrow.
No, I wish. But there is a decline in participation in universities across the board because of...
Really?
Yeah. There are people that are necessarily taking out these large loans. It's dropped off.
I wouldn't have thought that it happened yet. I would have thought that they're still...
We're just starting to see the decline. And that's the thing is I think this is going to continue. I think as people wake up and they go, listen, $100,000 in debt, and that's pretty average, right? And I've got a whole thing from Forbes.com here on debt. Do you know what the number is in terms of the debt Americans carry for student loan?
I think it's like $1 trillion.
It's $1.5 trillion. That's incredible. That is an astronomical number that most people...
But it's hard to wrap... Is there an average of like your average college student?
There is every statistic you would ever want in this article.
What is the average per student? Because that seems like something like that I could wrap my head around better.
This was written February 25th, 2019, and it is by Zach Friedman over there. He's a senior contributor of personal finance. He's the author of The Lemonade Life, and he writes about leadership and greatness. The student loan debt in 2019 is the highest ever. The latest student loan debt statistics for 2019 show how serious the student loan debt crisis has become for borrowers across the demographics and age groups. There are 45 million borrowers who collectively owe more than 1.5 trillion in student loan debt, and the U.S. student loan debt is now the second highest consumer debt category behind only mortgage debt. The higher and higher than both credit cards and auto loans. Borrowers in this class of 2017 on average owe $28,650, according to the Institute for College Access and Success. So on average,
$30,000.
$30,000, man. And the thing is,
and you have to understand what an average is. Yeah, that's insane.
yeah. So in terms of overall, when you look at paying things back like this at 6-8%, in terms of your minimum payments, and the thing is these are not expungible. You don't get to default on student loan debt. You will pay student loan back, or they will garnish your wages from whoever you're making money from. They'll go into your bank account, or they will go into your employer, and they will take that money before you ever see it.
But on top of the fact that it's highly regulated by the government, and they have the changes that they have made are not market based, so it's not because of price signals. They've made these changes like, oh, you can defer them for X number of years, and you have all these programs. And what it does, it ends up with people deferring them for as long as they can because they don't think about it, having insane, like you talk about 6%. Effectively, it might look like 6%, but effectively, because they skip so many years and have all these weird programs, they end up paying much more in effective APR.
I heard a case where somebody had somewhere in this amount of student loan debt, and they ended up paying over $250,000 for that $28,000 loan.
You can do it in a smarter way, but of course, there's a bunch of broken systems because none of them are pushed by, or almost none of them are pushed by market incentives.
I think you'd really like this article, and I'll link it. He has a ton of statistics in here. The student loan forgiveness statistics. Student loan forgiveness comes in several forms. Two of the most popular types of student loan forgiveness are public service loan forgiveness and teacher-student loan forgiveness. So, public service loan forgiveness. For one, government.
Go work for the government.
Teacher-student loan forgiveness. So basically, in Georgia here, I think it's after 10 years, if you still have student loan debt as a teacher in a public school system, government indoctrination system, they wipe out your student loan debt.
I mean,
so the government is letting the government slide, basically.
No, the government is footing the bill. No,
yeah,
the government is letting it slide at your expense. Is the better way of saying that?
Yeah,
as usual,
as tax cattle.
Yeah,
right.
At your expense, everybody.
Join us, and we'll wipe out your student loan.
For people who don't have college degrees, that might bother them just like a little bit more than others.
It's
like why am I footing the bill?
It's a choice to go to college, correct?
I decide not to go.
Yeah, it's
like, why should I have any burden about college?
So
whatsoever?
None. You choose not to have kids. You choose not to go to college. You choose choices in life.
Bunch of mooches out there, man.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
You got everybody keeping banks down over here. This is ridiculous. Public service loan forgiveness, cumulative borrows. Guess.
Say that again.
Public service loan forgiveness, cumulative borrowers.
Every year? Or?
No, overall. 800. It's 890,000.
That's less than I would have thought it would be.
Yeah.
So like almost 1 million out of 45 million.
Yeah. This is for forgiveness.
Okay.
And so
people who have worked for the government or been a teacher for more than 10 years.
Borrowers who have submitted applications is 41,000. The total number of applicants is 49,000. So
that must be per year.
Yeah. Numbers of applications approved 423. Numbers of applications denied 32,409.
That's crazy.
The total dollar amount forgiven, $12.3 million.
That's really small.
Well, when you look at it, if it is a 10-year program, okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say, it is. It's a fraction of
that makes sense.
An hour basically. Well, it's actually
that could compound over time though, because if it was I don't know when it was instituted, but it would take time to get more and more people on that train waiting for their 10 years.
Yeah. This next category is states with the most student loan debt. Who would you think is number one? The
numbers, bigger states, right? So California.
California number one. Student loan debt is $111 billion.
If they did per capita, that'd be more interesting, but.
Yeah. Texas is next, 85. New York, 73. Florida, 72. Georgia. I did not.
Georgia's number 5?
They are.
But we're only the 8th most populated state?
That's right. Do you know how much?
Number?
Yeah.
What was Florida?
Florida was 72.
So 59.
50. and that is of 1.4 million borrowers. So between 1.4 million borrowers, you have over $50 billion in
I
debt.
thought you said million.
Yeah. So the
Million or billion?
billion.
Okay.
So rounding out the top 10 is Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and North Carolina.
Yeah. So yeah, all states that have big colleges.
Might as well give the states that are doing
The best.
less tyranny.
Well, they're also less popular. I'm going to say Nebraska. No. I'm going to say North Dakota and Idaho
No, they're actually not on here.
and Alaska.
Utah's number one.
Utah.
Yeah, 18,000.
Look at them financially smart Mormons.
Those Mormons. And then you got New Mexico, 21,000. Nevada, 22. Wyoming, California. Washington, Arizona.
Wyoming, California.
Yeah, this is high student loan debt states and low student loan debt states. So it's on an average student loan is what it is. So it's broken down by the average of students.
You said California though, and that was at the top.
That was in a different. That was
that was at full number.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, this thing gets very particular about its breakdown.
What's the headline so I can link it?
The headline on this is Student Loan Debt Statistics in 2019, a $1.5 trillion crisis.
1.5 trillion.
Yep.
The website
is Forbes.com.
Forbes. Okay, cool. I will link that in the show notes.
But I just
No, it's fascinating.
it is absolutely fascinating, and I tell people all the time, especially when I can kind of counsel young men or mentor them if they're asking me, hey man, what should I do? Should I go into the military? No man, you should probably not go into the military. What about free school? Hey, listen, school. Do you know what you want to do? Do you want to be an engineer? Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a lawyer? Because really, outside of that, you really don't need to go there. I mean, I say that broadly and generically.
Sure.
But for the most part, you really don't need a degree to go do anything for the most part. You need real work experience. You need an aptitude.
Well, you need education. It's just that's not necessarily the best value education you can get, or the best experience education, or the one that will get you a leg up based on the competition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's probably not a bad value, but it's the same thing. Like if there was gold coins raining from the skies, gold coins are fancy and shiny, but if everybody has them, it doesn't really matter that much.
Had a 30-minute conversation with my oldest son, 8 years old, Jackson, about economy and money 2 days ago. Just thought I'd interject that. It was a fascinating conversation with him. Really cool. And by the time we got to his grandparents' house, when I dropped him off yesterday, you know what I told him?
What?
I said, you just got more pure economics than I got in my entire time in the government indoctrination process. Unbelievable. But he knows what money is. He knows medium exchange, and he knows trade, and he understands the difference between Austrian and Keynesian economics now.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Anyway.
We have another subject that is less awesome. And I have a clip for this, and I think we should just play the clip and then talk about it.
Rock and roll. Let's do it.
It's about a minute long, so bear with us. The person talking, for those who might not recognize his annoying voice, is A.G. Barr.
In the Vietnam era, our country learned a lesson. I remember that our brave troops who served in that conflict weren't treated very well in many cases when they came home. And sometimes they bore the brunt of people who were opposed to the war. And the respect and gratitude owed them was not given. And it took decades for the American people finally to realize that. And I'm very happy today when I'm at an airport and troops come through, coming back or being deployed. There's frequently everything stops and they get a round of applause because people recognize that that's the right thing to do for these people who are serving us. But I think today American people have to focus on something else, which is the sacrifice and the service that is given by our law enforcement officers. And they have to start showing more than they do, the respect and support that law enforcement deserves. And if communities don't give that support and respect, they may find themselves without the police protection they need.
Woohoo!
So,
Oh, what a tyrant. This guy, ladies and gents, if you don't know who AG Barr is, you can go back and listen to episode 116, episode 77, and episode 57 of The Rebellion. All yours.
agreed. He's a sneaky one.
He is.
In that, like most people, especially the sneaky ones, everything's has some truth to it. You can't just make up, like if he had just talked unicorns and rainbows, and like people wouldn't take him seriously. So I think the most insidious thing he said during the whole thing is his conflation of respect and support. There's a whole difference there. And he does it multiple times with all these emotional stories with things that are true. Like, I think that people were mean and disrespectful in unacceptable ways, and are today, okay, to law enforcement. But he talks about the returning like soldiers from Vietnam. Many people who were like didn't want to go there and were conscripted.
Or they're all conscripted. Tons.
Against their will, most of them, I guess.
50,000 men were sent off to their death by a lying, tyrannical, just absolutely evil military-industrial complex, and never, ever, ever realized their potential in life because they were conscripted and sent to die for a
and many
lie.
died.
50,000 plus.
And so the fact that he uses that emotional ploy that has truth to it, right? I don't think that somebody who is forced to go there, comes back, should be spit on and told that they're a horrible person, right? I don't think you should tell most people that for the most part, right? And conflates that and talks about respect and something that we can all kind of feel in our hearts and so forth, and then says respect and then just subtly and support, as if we're supposed to innately support it just because we might be decent people who respect people.
Think about what he's really saying.
Without blinking an eye.
Think about what he's really saying is you need to respect people that we conscripted and sent off to die. That is a hell of a statement.
It is, but that part about the conscription is a little bit less in this.
He can't say it
in this sense. Of course he can't. Of course he can't say it.
Can't say.
Of course he can't acknowledge that. This is the same kind of person who would say. I mean, he said the comment about, "Oh, I love it when they clap for the troops and so forth." But this is the same kind of person who would probably say, "This is the same. You're not a patriot unless you respect and support." The support one is the one that bothers me more. And he'd probably go on the other side and be like, "You're not a patriot if you don't walk in line as we conscript you, thankfully applauding the opportunity to serve your country and all the formalities that go with that."
You want to talk about one of the most evil men in the government today?
I think he's extremely insidious.
Yeah, just oozes evil. That guy, I'll tell you what I expect to come out of his mouth in his lifetime is there needs to be a law. There needs to be a law.
He says it all the time.
That you cannot disrespect.
Oh, okay.
Cops.
I didn't know where you were going.
That you.
I mean, but the thing is, it wouldn't be new. The Alien and Sedition Act, is that the one that said
John Adams?
Is that the one that said you couldn't
speak ill?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not like it's a new idea. So it's not like somebody like AG Barr wouldn't have it too, because it's there, it exists. Apparently, he's quite attracted to government intervention. This would be something he would see and be like, "Oh, what a fine idea there you have." Would be a shame if it didn't go to use.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, but you want to talk about? I mean,
this one is weird though, because he doesn't go there. He goes to this weird threat of, well, we're just not going to be there, which I'm pretty sure, like you said, it's like, woohoo. Well, that might not be the biggest problem.
The greatest
since you're also part of the problem yourself.
And here's the thing: is it would actually do wonders for the public perception of cops. Put these guys in stations and have them respond like firemen. You put these guys in stations, you get them out of the public instead of taking people with low amounts of quote unquote narcotics, throwing them in jail and finding ways to strip more money from people for peaceful policy violations, right? And we've got a great listener out there who's going through this here in the state of Georgia right now, where he was broke at the time, absolutely broke, and he goes through this place where they're not supposed to clock their speed, and it's basically a speed trap that's set up. And these guys absolutely, take his money, and we're talking about people that don't have a lot of extra income. How is that going to make their life better? You're not doing anything. And so
but they do this all the time. Georgia's actually one of the worst states to where you'll have laws. I remember the first time I ever realized that this was the case. I was reading a bill about real estate licenses. And I didn't expect to see something else, but I'm just reading the bill about real estate licenses, and it's probably going to be a no because all the bills suck. But all of a sudden it talks about if you lose your real estate license, if you're behind on your child support, you lose your real estate license. And I'm like, what? Why is child support in the real estate license bill? And on top of it, even if you accept that it's in the bill, which it shouldn't, and the government shouldn't have anything to do with real estate licenses anyways, you're like, if you take away a real estate license, maybe there's less money to pay child support in the first place, you dumb people.
Yeah. Man, when he talks about losing their protection, it's also a fantasy, because here's the Supreme Court has upheld that they have no obligation to protect you. So
okay, but that did happen, but there is at least an impression by many people and by cops as well that what they're doing, I would disagree in large part. It's not protection, but that's what they're doing. Cops do protect people even though they're not forced to or legally liable if they don't.
Sure. Yeah, but here's the thing: is you are mandated. You must pay the overlords for their quote unquote protection. And when the Supreme Court sits there and says, "Hey, they don't actually have any obligation to protect you," that's a weird thing in America. It's weird to sit there and say, "You owe us money for protection," and you will hear this from the thin blue line cops all over the place out there. Well, what are you doing? Why don't you try to do a better job? I just had this argument with a guy that I served with in the Marine Corps who's like a super cop now. He is god awful.
What's the difference between a normal cop and a super cop?
Oh, at least, some of the more normal ones out there aren't going to sit out there and defend things that happen down in Miami where, police grab, or police are following this UPS truck.
Oh, is that the recent one? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know, this happened down in Miami where police follow this UPS truck that had been hijacked by a maniac. I'm not going to mince words. The guy's a maniac. They stole about $3,000 worth of jewelry, and the cops get a notification. The UPS driver is in the UPS van, and they are speeding down the highway. I don't know if they use spike strips. I think they actually just got caught in traffic. At this point, the parade of cops and law enforcement behind this UPS truck, they get out of their cars, and some of them start taking cover behind civilian vehicles with civilians in them, and then a tirade of gunshots. They murder everybody in terms of the maniac who stole and hijacked the UPS truck. The UPS.
How many people died besides the maniac?
The UPS driver, so the hostage, and one civilian. And you start to look at this and unpack this, and you go, "Oh, this is incredible," and nobody's talking about it. Like nobody in mass media is talking about this at all.
Not under that lens. I found out about it because they were talking about it, but not with that angle.
And so I've obviously been pretty vocal about the whole thing. And this jackass, who's a cop, starts to chime in. "Oh, you're better than this," And I was like, "What are you talking? Are you going to defend this on everything that you know?"
So what was his argument of why it's defensible?
You don't know all the facts.
Was there anything?
Here's
more than
the thing: is I know some facts. I know for a fact that there is a hostage in that UPS truck. I also know for a fact that the 4 basic safety rules apply in every situation when you are armed. That is, first and foremost, treat every weapon as if it were loaded, even though it was unloaded. Never let your muzzle cover anything you do not intend to destroy. Keep your fingers straight and off the trigger until you're up on target and ready to shoot. And 4, know your target and its background. Number 4 here in this case, when you start looking at all the shots and all the cops and where the bullets impacted, because people have redlined these things in terms of where the bullet impacts are, you look at what's going on and you know for a fact that these guys have not considered their background. The fact that they are
they being taught to do this? Because I've heard of other stories. There's this one story in California from quite a few years ago that's just as or it's horrific too. There's no need to prioritize them.
Yeah. Where
there's video of it, and so you see this house that they're swatting for drugs, and the guy comes out of the front door. There's, I don't know the right number, but it's at least a dozen cops who are at the front door, and he doesn't have a gun in his hands, but he has a gun on him. And you'll see cops, they've got a gun, they're racing to get to him. They've got a gun over the head of other cops to shoot. And
yes.
And they shoot like 100 times. The biggest problem is, even though I think they could have apprehended him without shooting, is that one of the bullets goes through a few walls and hits a kid in the back room. The perpetrators, the criminal's kid. I'm air quotes for those who are not watching.
Yeah.
And kill. And then it's like, are they being taught even to consider background at all or not?
I'll tell you right now, man. I find the cowardice of the average American cop in this day and age.
I find that to be less cowardice and more, for lack of a better term, hot-headed, like adrenaline
excitable
junkie kind of is.
Well,
because it's not fear that's doing that. It's like, I don't know, this excitement of we're gonna do it and get the bad guys kind of thing.
So there's a lot of studies, and I actually was part of one of these studies one time where when we just talk about the excitability factor, right? When you're actually under fire and you're returning fire, a lot of people won't even acquire their sights, right? It's a trained thing, and so when you know
because they forget about it, or because their body's incapable of it.
It's because
I could see like shaking or
that adrenaline dump. You go into, if you're not highly trained, you go into gross motor skills. At that point, gross motor skills, which is chamber, right? You tap, rack, bang, right? So
like the muscle memory
tap,
part.
Back, yeah. You're locked and loaded. You got a finger ready to go. You're now. This is where these safety rules really have to be second nature. They can't. You don't just say them over and over and over so that you can say them. You say them over and over and over so that they're second nature, and then you practice them, right? Like it's this Pat Rogers guy that trained me in one of my first shooting packages. He always had the saying is, practice doesn't make perfect. That's the stupidest thing you could ever say. Practice makes permanent, and bad practice will make you permanent in a bad way. So perfect practice makes permanent.
Makes perfect permanent.
Yes. And so with that, these guys either don't have the training, it is not second nature to them, and when they get in the heat of the moment and they have that adrenaline dump, the first thing they're thinking about is themselves. It's not selflessness. It's, I got to go home at night. We got to go home at night. It's ridiculous.
Well, I imagine that selflessness could be practiced and perfectly permeated permanently. Lots of P's. If you focused on that, but they're probably not focusing on that.
No, it's not even. It's this guy is a threat right here and right now, and it's probably over some ridiculous, silly policy or some unconstitutional law that's
since
out there.
Most of that stuff has to do with drugs, of course it's silly.
Of course it is. And you look at incarceration rates that are out there in terms of your state prisons, your local jails, your federal prisons and jails, and then your youth detention centers and things like that. Most of it is made up of non-violent drug offenses, man. And for an AG to fan the flames in this country at this time when cops are destroying neighborhoods, and I mean families and lives and putting people into terrible, terrible situations, to go out there and say, we got to start respecting cops more.
Well, it misses what we've been talking about a lot, is like all the nuance. And there's been a few quotes from somebody from the ACLU and somebody who used to be the Civil Rights Division under Obama. That's kind of funny. But she happens to be right in this time, and they both say basically like, well, respect and support, which I think should be separated, are earned. They're not just given, and even if you give it, it's not blanketly given.
Yeah.
Like you don't just blanketly say, well, oh yeah, this one person is good, or this idea is good, and then you just support everything. So it's kind of flipping. In this article from Reason, they make the argument that it's flipping the one bad apple spoils the bunch, kind of on its head. They're claiming that the right to be served by good apples requires us to eat the rotten ones as well.
Yeah.
He doesn't say it because that if he said it,
it's a great quote.
Somebody would. The quote is from the guy who wrote this article, which is Scott Shackford in Reason. Props to him. But if he said it out loud, right, even if he didn't use the metaphor of apples, people would think, it'd be like, oh, that's a little weird. But that is what he's implying. That is what he just told people that's what they need to do. He said that twice, that they need to do. He didn't say should do. He didn't try to bridge anything. He said this is what they need to do, and then he said, or there'll be a threat, which is a funny threat, in my opinion.
Less government enforcement. Thank God.
But yeah, that's what he's saying. He says you have to get the rotten ones too, and I don't know how anybody who is affected by this problem could, I don't know, the family of the guy who got choked, Eric Garner, or all the other stories that we don't even know the names of, could have a good reaction to this.
Yeah.
If you're not affected, I could see how you would be like, oh, well, that makes sense. We need to support them so they support us, kind of thing. But if you've been affected and you're told to support the people who just did something horrible,
no,
I mean, it's not going to work.
And that's the thing, man. Is
I could if you say respect, if you say try to empathize, even if you say some things that are really, really hard, like try to have a conversation with the killer of your loved one, that's really hard. But I could understand that sentence. I could be like, hey, this is hard, but let's try to get through it. It would be good to have conversation. But when you say something that doesn't make any sense, blindly support, I mean, I understand people just saying, I don't know, F this and so forth. That makes sense.
And I'll tell you right now, we got a major problem in this country, because for guys like us, and especially a guy like me, man, I will say
you look like a cop.
I was going to say, from personal experience, most people who are vets or military or service-oriented people, when you start losing guys like me, and not only losing us, but you are now putting us in opposition to cops, because cops are seen as abusive, as not upholding their oath, which means going out and actively violating the things like the First Amendment. I see stories all the time where people assemble to feed homeless people and they get arrested.
Well, the problem is they're coming from a mindset of if it's illegal, it's a crime.
That's the problem. And there's no judgment and exercise. It's just we're following orders, which we all know the Nuremberg defense doesn't work. So I see blatant violations of the First Amendment. We're seeing huge violations in the Second, and people are dying now for resisting things like red flags. When cops are going out and will not just ante up and say, hey, listen, no, we are absolutely, quote unquote, a gun sanctuary, or we are going to make sure that the feds don't come in here and strip anybody of their right to bear arms, and we'll never uphold those.
Because that's what we said we would do.
Yeah, because that's our oath to you, and that's your money is paying us. The fact that civil asset forfeiture, stop and frisk, the violation of your person, property, and effects for the Fourth Amendment every time. Fifth Amendment seizure, that's more of the civil asset forfeiture side. I just see cops willingly violate these things and then stick up for each other, even if they're not the one violating them. And for me, there's people out there that's like, well, there's good cops and bad cops. Hey, man.
Well, there are.
The problem is if I don't see the good cops taking to task the bad cops, demanding that either the AGs or the sheriffs who are in charge or anybody else, the local prosecutors, that those people, if they don't put these guys in cages for violating their oath and violating the law, then how are they good cops?
I think even if you don't see them, they still exist. We've got a practical sense in that the world is just too big to see everything, and people are under duress and limited in all that they can do.
I just don't see it, man.
But that same sentence could be said about politicians, and yet we know, because we're more in tune with that there are politicians who are waging a war for liberty. But not everybody sees that either. Some people email Matt and they're like, "You're just a piece of human garbage and part of the same thing. And how dare you send me a letter asking me for what's important to me, because you're just one of them." And I think that's dangerous. I think just as much as we have to apply principles that are hard to apply, right? It's hard to not generalize. It's hard to have empathy or try to understand when there's something that makes us really, really mad that might affect us more personally. I've been personally affected by law enforcement in bad ways. I was much worse at applying my principles in the thoughts that I had in my head about those specific law enforcement officials. He's a judge in particular, not a cop. But I think we need to be just as good, even better, at doing that if we're going to be the ones who create the bridge first.
Yeah, and I will point out there are certain groups. LEAP is one of them.
I was about to say earlier, I really want to have one of those LEAP people on.
I can probably arrange that. I'm buddies with Sheriff Mack, who is also a pretty damn good dude.
He's pretty good.
And I think he actually just came over to the Libertarian Mises Caucus recently as well.
I'm surprised, actually, because he's not the most libertarian-ish person out there.
I know, yeah. But, I mean, there are, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and LEAP are probably two that stick up to me. CISPA, I think, is kind of how you say that. CSPOA is what Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers stand for. Anyway, those organizations don't get tons of press. And maybe we should be those guys, obviously, in counterculture press that start making sure that we have them on more enough. And I'll tell you who else would be a great guy to have on is Pete from down here in Atlanta, Man Beyond the Wall. I can never say his last name to save my life. Mansrader.
Well, that's not his real name.
I know. Cool. But Pete Carnianos or whatever, however you say it.
Yeah, I'd actually think that one of the better things would be to have, and I know it's jokingly, like my sheriff, who's I think is very, 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 very wrong. I've said he's a horrible person before.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to have somebody who we could actually humanize and have a real conversation with. Those are really hard to make happen. Your sheriff, we're kind of in the same boat. But those are the people that I want to lead people to. But though I would love to have a real conversation with somebody real, because these things happen behind closed doors. And things break down to where there's much more agreement, and we can point the finger at a system instead of at each other completely. I'm not saying they don't make bad decisions and shouldn't be responsible for their decisions. I wish that could happen more. So I'm saying that. I'm putting it out in the world, so maybe it happens.
I've actually invited quite a few people to come on the show who are either law enforcement or deputies that are out there, and the uncomfortableness of their replies and the wiggliness. It's indicative of cop culture right now across America in general. And
so what can we do to change that? I wonder if what we should do is go find, and LEAP is some of them, but former cops and former sheriffs, have them on, have the current cops and sheriffs hear those, and maybe that would bridge the
I would love to have both of them on. I would
of course.
I would love to have a guy that's been there and done it sit there and say, "Hey, dude, you don't have to do this kind of stuff anymore. Like this is your oath precludes you from violation of this. It actually holds you in contempt of law. Real kidding law. If you're going to uphold these things, that's a problem. So anyway, I mean, but to digress back into AG Barr, I think this guy absolutely would be the guy that turns the thin blue line into a Nazi-esque type organization.
Well, I mean,
that you cannot criticize.
Our episode, whichever one of those three it is, where we talked about the red flags, where Barr was a big part of it because he's a big proponent of red flags. The system he outlines is very Nazi-esque.
That's 116, episode 116 for those of you guys out there.
And I don't say fascist because fascism has to do with something else. It's very Nazi-esque because they did a gun grab.
Yeah, of course they did. And I'll tell you right now,
And red flags are gun grabs, in case you didn't know.
yeah, AG Barbie, and as bad as this guy is, man, I see him wanting more and more power and control and authority. And right now, as the AG, he's the guy, man. Like, he is the guy that can temper the nation, or in terms of police relations with the nation. I mean, for him to stand in front of people and say, you've got to respect cops. Well, damn it, cops, you better start respecting the Bill of Rights. You better start, upholding that. You better start respecting the citizens that pay your salaries.
It's weird because even on the other side, we talked about this once, and there was one the other day. There was all these videos that came out because of Christmas, where people were just rushing into a store in California, stealing a bunch of stuff and rushing out, in groups of 20 or 30. And they attribute the increase in this happening because California, I think the whole state, maybe it's just a city. I'm sorry for the bad information there, but passed a bill saying that anything under a certain value would not be a misdemeanor. Like, they're just not going to prosecute it. And these come from AGs, and we did that one episode where we talked about an AG in Maryland or in Baltimore who was running on that platform.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, we can't even get one side to cancel out the other side. Is you guys just get it wrong. One is let's have complete tyranny, and the other side is let's say crimes are okay now. It's like, whoa, people,
guys.
Damn it.
You're missing the whole point of this whole government thing, man. Oh God! But I guess it's the greatest lie ever told. I still contend that government is not here to protect you. Government is here to control you. I
don't think it's the greatest lie, but it's a pretty big one.
It's one of the great lies of history. It's definitely killed more.
Sorry,
and more
I get
people.
too serious sometimes. I'm just the greatest lie. Hold on, I've got my list of lies here.
Yeah.
No. The greatest lie is that the Fed is good.
I don't know. And for those of you guys are cops out there that are, these are.
We have a few cops who listen to the show
that are awful. Hey man, if you guys are out there and you're not doing this kind of stuff, I commend you. And I know it's probably not a real popular position. Keep doing it. We need to hear from you, and you can contact the show if you want to come on. We'll hide your identity and keep you anonymous.
Yeah, I mean, we can do one where we change your voice and everything. It'll be kind of cool.
Yeah, I would love to actually do something like that.
We'll put a silhouette of somebody on the screen there. Those black silhouettes.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress, Banks. We're sitting at 118, so we better move on into.
We'll move on into farewell.
Farewell.
This is farewell from Mr. Isaacson.
Good riddance.
I gotta say, watching. So this is a farewell speech. It got some press coverage because he's known, I guess, and because they use the word bipartisan. So a bunch of people wrote some articles and so forth saying, "Oh, he gave us such a beautiful farewell speech talking about bipartisanship."
Yeah.
I don't know why this guy's Russian, but sure. I listened to it. I'm a little bit more vested because he is from here in Georgia, and his legacy in terms of politics and how power works in Georgia, the power structures in Georgia, he'll be long gone, and we're going to still be
reeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of the people in power today work for Johnny Isaacson. The AG of Georgia was one of his campaign people. But the thing I found interesting is bipartisanship, and I felt bad for him. He does look old. I don't think that he can still be not a good person, make bad decisions, but being old. But there was some empathy that kind of exuded there. But most of what I felt bad for him about was the emptiness of this speech. There's parts that are interesting for us to talk about, but most of the excitement, the nostalgia that he's expressing, because this is a farewell speech, there's a lot of it, and I don't mind that some of this is personal because he's had this experience. Most of it, though, is attached to what happened there. The people around him, the people who work at the cafeteria, his colleagues, these little friendships between people. None of that, which is bad, but it is not the purpose of the stated purpose of the American government. The stated purpose, and what might seem more normal for me to be part of the farewell speech is, here was my job. Here's where I did my job. Here's the state of where I think things should be. I think we're doing a good job of upholding the Constitution, or a bad job of upholding the Constitution. And I hope that the people who replace me to do this job also do this job well. That's, to me, would seem like something that would be more fitting for this. And yet, no, it's about this infrastructure that shouldn't exist in the first place. And that made me feel sad for him because it seems kind of empty. Because it would be just any other job. This is like a speech he would give if he worked at Merrill Lynch for 50 years, whatever. He's been a politician for like 45 years in the Senate for like 15, I think.
He's been in politics for a long time, man.
Yeah, 45
long
years.
time. Corrupt, terrible.
Probably.
He's a turd, man. And I'm
Is that an acronym? Too old. Nah, I can't do it.
Yeah, Johnny Isaacson is one of the personifications of what a Republican from Georgia is today. And I say that because I'm going to point out some of the things that this guy's done. The accolades and the praise from fellow government worshiping bootlickers and status that's out there. One, Rob Woodall touted on December 3rd that Senator Johnny Isaacson will deliver his farewell speech from the Senate floor, 2:30 in his remarks, blah, 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 blah. I would like to thank you again, Johnny, for everything you've done for Georgia. The Senate is losing one of the best, and your presence will be greatly missed here in Washington, D.C.
Boy.
I wish you the best and your much-deserved retirement. I can imagine, basically, you can imagine what I said because I just put this in there. I put a little gif of Star-Lord saying, finally.
Is it weird? I don't get the finally.
Finally?
Finally,
he's retiring.
Gone. Okay,
he's gone.
Got it.
I ran into Johnny Isaacson when he couldn't even lift his bag into the overhead flying from here to D.C. years ago. Sat next to him in the aisle and had a quick conversation with him. Thought, hey, man, he says, here's my number. Call me. Let's talk about, veteran stuff in the military and foreign policy. And this, that never, ever, ever happened. That guy is so full of nonsense. Knowing that I was a veteran, knowing that I was on my way to D.C. to talk to people in the military. And
That's what they do, man.
Yeah, he's a complete sham.
So he's, in that sense, in that small sense, he is in an impossible situation. You cannot represent or pretend to represent 11 million people, Georgian, and you actually do have a responsibility to everybody in America if you're doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, you just uphold the Constitution
and talk to everybody. But that is this illusion that we paint that, oh, you meet a politician, he gives you your card, he writes his number, and he's like, oh, that's my personal number there. Like it can't work, and yet we pretend that it works.
Mm-hmm. So his overall score,
32,
constitutional score, leaving office in 2019, his overall score 53% constitutional voting record. Wow. I'd like to point out that in the 2019-2020 116th Congress, you know what his constitutional voting record
25.
was? 11.
Wow.
11 people. I'm going to say it again. Johnny Isaacson's 116th Congress constitutional voting record 2019-2020 is 11. It's barely double digits.
So just so you know, this is what happens. So you've got these people that you think are better. You've got these, I don't know, Barry Loudermilk or whatever milquetoast Republican from some other state is. They start out often. They can even start at 85%, okay? They can even start, they usually don't go in the 90s, but they can start pretty high up there. Within a decade or 15 years for Johnny in the Senate at least, most of them go below the 50%.
Yeah, he was in the 106th Congress back in 1999 and 2000. So some of his more recent votes for everybody that's out there to really put the icing on the cake for this turd on the amendment for 942 HR 4378, which was the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2020. He voted nay against it, which was been a spending cut. On the passage of Bill HR 4378, short-term appropriations, he voted aye for it, which was another bad vote. The budget deal, he didn't vote on the amendment to Senate Bill 1790, the National Defense Authorization Act for the year 2020 to prohibit unauthorized military operations in a war in Iraq. He voted nay again.
Was that Rand Paul's amendment?
I believe it was. And then to supplement border appropriations, aye once again. Disaster supplement appropriations, aye again. The resolution to stop the war against Yemen through Saudi Arabia. He voted against that. I mean, this guy is bad vote after bad vote. Public lands, he voted for the spending in the Consolidated Appropriations Act.
I think you'd probably stop me. Like, he probably voted for all the spending.
He voted for everything
and
bad.
He voted for all the wars. And he voted for all more government intrusion into your lives.
And then he voted for cloture on the motion to proceed on abortion. That was his one, quote unquote, good vote. Like, this guy, man, like I said, good riddance. Finally, thank God, this guy is out of office. The next person probably not going to be a whole lot better. So
let's listen to the interesting part of his very, very, very boring farewell speech. Dorn, I have to go back to fill some time for a second.
Me?
Or me, I can sing to you guys. Here we go.
Sometimes for being a bipartisan person. In fact, sometimes newspaper people write that I'm known for being bipartisan or being a softie. Some of them say worse than that, but I'm not going to do that. But I am a bipartisan person. I never saw people get things done by not agreeing with each other. You have to come to agreement. I made a living selling houses. You can't ever solve a problem if you got two people and they won't agree to a price and agree to a time to move. You have to find common ground.
So I'm going to pause a few times during this that I've now listened to 3 times.
He was one of those terrible, awful realtors.
Yeah. So realtor. He's a developer.
Oh, he was a developer.
Yeah, he's
no wonder he's in politics.
Crap ton of money in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Cousins Realty, I believe, is what he's invested in.
Right.
But anyways, that's another story. He makes the comparison to a house, and the problem is, and I wish he would sit down here, and we might have to not call him a turd, but we could ask him some questions and be like, hey, what's the difference between a house and government action, though? People have commonly across the world agreed that shelter is necessary. So, fine, yeah. If you're trying to buy a house and you need shelter, you might need to come to an agreement on the price. If not, well, house is not going to happen. You're not going to have shelter. Cool. Shane is laughing his ass off over there. Government action, just because you decide that there's a government action, you don't need it to happen. And it precludes, like, and of course this means everything he says makes no sense after this, but I thought that was just hilarious. And I hope that's what you're laughing at.
I am, man. Johnny Isaacson, man, his understanding of rights and things that that are natural and apparent and abhorrent versus the state.
I think he lives on a completely different world in that.
Well, he hasn't had to worry about money for a long time.
You can make logic out of anything, right? Mm-hmm. Like, children often don't know, like, the context of things, and it sounds like a child's argument.
Yeah.
To compare one thing that has nothing to do with the other thing, because transplant house with the Patriot Act or with taking your guns, and it starts to sound a little weird. Starts to sound like, hey, we have to come to an agreement or we're not going to be able to take your guns. Like, whoa, hold on. Never ask for the taking of guns things. Hold on. We have to come to an agreement or we're not going to be able to kill people like 7,000 miles away. Why would we want any agreement on that?
Yeah.
Sounds like a bad agreement.
Yeah, he's a softie on rights, but he's a real hawk on coming after your money.
So my question is, do you think he knows that he's making this comparison that allows for horrible things because he says house but doesn't say war, taking your guns and so forth? Or do you think that he's just completely delusional?
Yes.
And bought into the system?
Yeah. Well, and I think there's another thing. I think people spend too long in politics, and what happens is they hear.
So you're just saying the popular stuff now, Shane, right?
Well, they hear something in the halls and they go, I like that. I'm going to put that in my repertoire, right? Like I'm going to add that to some of the things that I do to be a quote unquote more polished politician. And when you spend your time listening to nothing but BS day in and day out for decades and decades and decades, that repertoire gets full of BS. And he may not hear it. He I don't know, how old is he? 80 plus years old, probably.
Something 74 actually. He looks older.
Jeez, yeah, he's not aging
well.
well.
I mean, he's got Parkinson's basically. So.
At any rate, yeah, I think that he's heard enough, remembered enough, and now is regurgitating it all as if we live in the same little world, and we don't. And for us and the trained ears out there that hear this guy talk, you can sit there and you can pick it apart a million ways from Sunday, and at the same time he's clueless. It's the nature of politics. I see it. I see it with people who sit here who are from the government, who espouse talking points and and anecdotes and fun little ridiculous things, and they don't see what they're doing. When you repeat a question that I didn't ask and then answer the question that you asked back, like you're doing exactly what every politician does out there.
So see, I agree with you, and I could see that happening. This next one you're going to hear, this one seems harder to miss.
Ladies and gents, I'd just like to point out for the record that Banks is torturing me today by making me listen to Johnny Ives.
I don't believe in torture unless it's voluntary torture.
You're
allowed
I'm
to.
Still sitting here.
Shane likes the pain, guys.
Oh, boy.
He's a little bit of a masochist.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the right. I get those confused.
Yeah,
S&M,
I think I finally got it right. Masochist, self-inflicted.
Okay, so a little bit more of Johnny.
With a law, you can't pass a law, you can't solve a problem. Just period, end of sentence.
God!
If one of these people says my way or the highway, then we're all in real trouble. So I want to talk about bipartisan, but what bipartisan really is, and I don't think most of you really know what bipartisan is. And I shouldn't say that to an educated group of people like this, who've been down a lot of tough trails like I have as well. But bipartisan doesn't mean that a Democrat and a Republican talk to each other every once in a while. It doesn't mean, it means this.
It means screwing the people.
I'll pause.
It means screwing the people. Oh, that first comment. What was his first comment in that?
We just laughed at it. What was it?
Oh, Jesus.
It was a second ago.
God, it just made my skin crawl. Play it again.
Sure.
Can you back it up and play that part again?
I can totally back it up.
I can't let this stand. I cannot let Johnny off the hook.
Living selling houses. You can't ever solve a problem if you got two people and they won't agree to the price.
That
and agree
right
to
there.
the time.
Hold on, no, that was the first one that we did.
You can't solve a problem unless you make a law.
Yeah.
Holy hell!
That's what he must. I even didn't pay attention to this, but that's what he must believe. Like all the problems have a solution in the form of a law.
This is the problem with you.
This is how you get such.
Government.
This is how you get such bad votes with what we perceive as very little thinking. Because, obviously, like, what is the why would you just go to this default of a law? So his default, it's good, it's cool to understand it actually, and you're helping me do this. His default is we just got to find the right law.
Yeah.
It's going to take some hard work over some late nights.
I was talking about
compromising, coming to the right law, because the right law exists. We're just going to, in the same way that we're searching for the truth, they're searching for the law, right law. They're
talking about
it's here somewhere.
This very thing about money the other day. I mentioned in that one meme that I don't believe, after reading a lot of Rothbard and a whole bunch of other Austrian type economics, that people really understand money. And I don't say like people, like we don't really understand a perfect practice with money. It doesn't exist. And so
I think we don't understand most things, but money might be one of the worst things.
One of the worst things, because it has such dire implications. So we don't understand it as a species. We don't understand money. So let's take that and cross-pollinate everything. If humans haven't just really figured out and dialed in the solution to things in terms of the problems in their communities, in their environments, in their families, right? The worst damn thing you could possibly do is take a monopoly of force and concentrate this monopoly on force as the only people on Earth who can solve the problem.
Well, imagine if you did that with other things, and you just took the problem, like the solution that existed in, I don't know, the 2nd century, and we're like, you know what, the solution to to garbage is we're just going to have these like in France, at least in big cities, these canals off the side of the road, and you're just going to dump your crap literally into those canals and they'll wash away.
Sure.
And imagine if the government was just like, that's the solution. You're not allowed to question the solution. No, it stinks. We don't. No, it doesn't stink. It doesn't stink. That's what we're gonna do.
You're removing the ability to solve a problem from all of these people who could solve it maybe differently in their areas for best practices, and you are concentrating it into a government that lacks vision and is supported by cronies and people who have money that want this.
Well, that's not even the worst part. Those people definitely make it worse, but it's lacking the price signals. There's the incentives are all gone. There's no incentives. So, and like people can definitely make that worse, but the incentives are what incentivize you to make changes.
Yeah.
Like maybe those roads stunk and somebody was like, you know what?
Can't solve a problem if you can't make a law.
This smell is just not doing it for me.
What a dirtbag. All right, I'm sorry. I couldn't keep it in anymore.
I'm totally fine. This is the purpose of listening to this, is to commentate on it. If you don't provide commentary, we're going to be screwed, Shane.
Oh, boy.
There's no more podcast.
All right.
You have to find common ground.
No.
Same thing with the law. You can't pass a law, you can't solve a problem. Just period, end of sentence. If you're one of these people who says my way or the highway, then we're all in real trouble. So I want to talk about bipartisan, but what bipartisan really is, and I don't think most of you really know what bipartisan is. And I shouldn't say that to an educated group of people like this.
It's so
who've been down a lot of tough trails like I have as well. Okay. But bipartisan doesn't mean that a Democrat and a Republican talk to each other every once in a while. It doesn't mean, it means this, that it means that two people come together, probably have differences, probably have a lot of differences, but they find a way to get to the end of the trail where there's a possibility of a solution. And then they do the things you have to do to get that position.
How empty does that?
America's today is built on people who found a way to get to that end of the solution. No question about it.
So many of the things he says are so empty. It's like, you do the things you got to do, and that's just the way it is. Period. End of sentence. And then
the ends justify the means.
But he's given us apparently the roadmap to success, right? And then he says, and that's what has given America. He's saying America's all like awesome, which this is the thing that most makes me think that deep down somewhere, or maybe he's thinking about it right now as he's giving the speech, he knows that what he's saying is a little bit of a bunch of malarkey. Because he knows that his colleagues right now are screaming on TV talking about how bad things are in America.
Boy.
But he's living in this little bubble in the Senate, because that's all he talks about. He talks about this little, like the real human parts of this discussion are just about the fact that, he loves his assistants and he likes his colleagues and he gets along with them even though they're Democrats, which all stuff is fine. But everything else is devoid of any meaning. That he says that America's great, I don't believe he actually believes that America's in a great position. That one is a little bit too much, too clear to believe.
The fact that this guy hasn't really rehearsed and doesn't have a polished farewell speech, for me, seems par for the course with Johnny Isaacson and pretty much every other politician. Just going up there and kind of loosey-goosey, hanging out and talking and contradicting himself, like, let me tell you what bipartisanship means. Oh, I don't have to tell you guys what bipartisan. You guys are educated. Oh, Jesus Christ. This guy, in terms of really, really understanding and being so willy-nilly and flip-floppy and loose and rubbery, the fact that this guy is a senator from Georgia, it is embarrassing.
I think you could have the same person with the same kind of votes and horrible ideas
too,
who could have prepped a speech that was all like
I don't disagree,
fancy and so forth. I don't think that.
I don't disagree with you. What I'm just pointing out is this guy. He has been in a U.S. Senate seat, and this is who he is. The The idea that this is a guy that has the ability to appropriate funds from the American people through force and coercion to implement into quote unquote bipartisan problems. What a frigging disgrace and an embarrassment that Johnny Isaacson is, not only to this state, but to America in general. Glad he's gone. Can't wait to never ever hear about Johnny Isaacson again. And I hope, for God's sakes, that somebody steps up and does something good, and it at least challenges the system in terms of this. You know, we're going to have 2 Senate seats up for grabs in 2020 here in the state of Georgia.
Well,
and,
every 6 years it's up for grabs.
But 2. You've got Johnny Isaacson's seat up for 2020, and you've got Purdue's seat up for 2020 as well. And they both need to go.
No, they can't be up at the same time.
They have to be up at the same time because he's finishing his term early. There's an interim replacement in terms of this Joanne, or whatever the heck her name is. That
Kelly Loeffler?
Yeah, Kelly, Joanne, whatever. That Kemp replaced and that appointed. And so in 2020, there will be 2 elections for senator in November in Georgia. This is probably a once in a lifetime occurrence.
So the interim thing is not going to last 2 years?
No, it lasts till 2020.
Oh, till the next election happens.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Huh. I should have known that. I totally missed it.
I think we talked about it before. Anyway, that's all I've got for Johnny Isaacson.
I've got one more. You're going to have a little bit more.
Jesus
I'm
Christ.
sorry.
We're at 142 already.
Wow. It'll be short. It's more of a funny one. Here we go.
We're going to do everything we can to be a part of the solutions and the decisions that are going to have to be made. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But you're going to find something. If you try and do it, others watch you do it, if you start making decisions and solving problems, you're going to be more popular than other people. This is not a popularity contest.
Yes, it is.
It's not a popularity contest.
He just said it was a popularity
But
contest.
this is a will of minds. Bipartisanship is a state of being. It's a state of mind. There are people in the United States Senate that I work with, that I love working every day. I'm looking at someone right now in the eye. And they have an attitude that I like. I know I can go sit down and talk to them. If they say no, I will take it and I won't stick my tongue out at them or call them bad names or anything else. But they know I'll be there tomorrow, ask them to do something for me. Best way to get somebody to do something for you is when you hadn't done something for them the day before, then I think, maybe I help them out, I'll get some help on my side. It's a quid pro quo. That's a bad word.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Are you kidding me?
So my favorite part is that in that thing, he says, this is how you be popular. Oh, no, it's not a popularity contest. Well, it totally is. And you just kind of admitted it like half a second ago. And then he's like, well, you got to do something for me. I do something for you. That's how it works. Quid pro quo. Whoa. I mean, I didn't mean to say that. Like, he's just like, he's losing all the marbles there. It's like, these are not the things I'm saying, or not the words I'm saying.
Well, you governed with as much precision as your farewell speech in terms of your understanding of the English language, and you know what, good ridden. I'm done. There's a reason I didn't listen to this guy and in his farewell address. Man, what a sham.
Like it.
What a sham.
Like
it does give me content, and it does help me get pumped up about this show more and more. You got anything else on that side of the house?
No, that was the end of Johnny Isaacson.
See
I
Isaacson.
did not link the full video because I don't think it's that interesting.
Oh,
but if you
God.
put Senator Isaacson farewell speech, you'll find it on YouTube. Like, you can, if you trust me, like, it's a waste of time for most of it. I just am weird. But that's about it for the show. I enjoyed the subjects. Specifically the first one, because we didn't expect to talk about college and degrees in that much detail. So yeah, if you enjoyed the show and you also are a masochist like Shane and like it when we play you horrible politicians with bad ideas, you can support us on patreon.com/rebellionpod. We appreciate it. And you can also direct the show in a way you'd like. You send us an email and with some links to some content and want us to talk about it. Not only does it make it easier for us, but we will indulge you, and you'll be able to say that you influenced the media.
You're our market, and we respond to our market.
Yeah, you can do that by tagging us in any social media or by sending it directly to info@rebellionpod.com.
My favorite part, reading reviews. We have 103 right now. We did not get another written review, but we could we could really use it, guys. And I'll challenge you, if you've listened to more than 5 shows and you have not gone out there and given us a review, we'd really encourage you to do so. We appreciate them. We'll read them here on the air. And I mean, in terms of content, ladies and gents, we are expanding content as much as we can all the time. YouTube is a great place to go. I know there's nothing on TV out there for the most part that's worth your while in this day and age where you can get YouTube apps on things like Apple TV and Roku and everything else. You can watch the show from the privacy of your own home instead of nightly news and all that other garbage that's out there.
Yeah, we have 72 subscribers. So next goal is 100.
That's right.
We're starting out small.
But it's growing. So you can find us on YouTube. It's Rebellion Pod still, and you can probably just make a quick Google of that. But at any rate, you can find me and Banks on Twitter at FBanksWise and Shane T. Hazel, and then obviously on Facebook at, I believe, BanksWise and Shane T. Hazel as well. Yeah. Outside of that, you can
have a wonderful day.
Yeah, have a fantastic Friday and a great weekend. We just can't thank you enough for everything you do for us. So from here at the Rebellion, your place for peace, liberty, and free markets, we love you. We need you.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.